So we don't do anything small, and you know, we have, obviously, there's Starlinks, got a small 8 meter stacks that are really are part of our, we end up, when you see a Starlink mission, we end up sending out thousands of those to build out our constellation. And then you have the size of Dragon, but really what we've been building over the last 20 years is starting out with Falcon 1, which was just a one-stick, building the Falcon 9 program, continuing to build up capabilities with the Falcon 9 Heavy program. But as you can see, Starship is beating them all. It's got 2 times the thrust of a Saturn V. When I was in NASA, one of the things, I came in right, well, at the middle stages of the shuttle program. But there was a lot of people on the shuttle program that would, when I would go to shuttle launches, they would say, "Oh, Kathy, a shuttle launch is nice, but man, the launch you missed was a Saturn V." And now what is really cool last year is I was able to see a launch that was 2 times the thrust of a Saturn V just here in the Rio Grande Valley. Really, really amazing. And this is the game changer that I talked to you. If we can figure out how to get twice the mass up on our missions, then it really enables so much more space exploration. Next slide. So I'd say, you know, at the beginning, we talked about the company starting in 2002. At the very beginning, it was just about how do you build rocket engines, and then it was about how do you begin to learn about building and launching rockets, which is what happened when we were working the initial Falcons. And then it was about how do you build a medium-class launch vehicle. But as you can see, over the last 10 years, we've been kind of speeding up, and we went from the Falcon 9 reaching its first orbit to the first spacecraft, private commercial spacecraft going to the International Space Station in 2012, to beginning what is really a game changer, re-entry. People used to say that it was impossible to be able to return a first stage. So going back to the goals of cost-effective transportation, what's the most cost-effective method is to not throw away your artwork, but to be able to return it, reuse it, turn it around, and fly it again. So that was another major game changer that SpaceX did to be able to get its cost of launch down. We had the Crew Dragon, near and dear to my heart, as I was a commercial crew program manager for NASA. So the first mission that took U.S. astronauts back to the ISS on a U.S. commercial vehicle occurred in that May of 2020 timeframe, or 2021. And then we had our first high altitude Starship flight in May of 2021. And then, as you know, we're beginning to get ready. This April is a little bit of an old date, but we're actually getting ready. The vehicle's ready now. We're getting ready to do our stacked test and our wet dresses over the next few weeks. And then hopefully right after the Memorial Day weekend or close to it, we'll get our FAA license and be able to get ready for our next Starship launch. But this is a company that continues to learn, develop, make things better, and grow and move to the next thing. And it's as you can see, there's been a lot of growth over the last 15 years. So now talking a little bit about Starbase. So for us, when you see it now, and you see we're actually in the process of really expanding the capability of our little, really have this little island at the end of Highway 4, and really, and building it up for us to be the premier location for producing all of our Starships and being one of the major launch sites for the Starship. Next slide. Obviously, what's really, really important is you can't do this without a lot of people. This is one of my favorite pictures. You know, every once in a while you gotta get everybody together. We had just stacked the vehicle for our flight in November, and we got a bunch of people out. God took a picture because you had to like sit there and really appreciate the fact that we had rebuilt the pad, got the vehicle stacked, and we're ready to fly again for that second mission. But all of this needs like a full production capability. When you're building the tallest rocket launch in Cat Shower, you have almost 500 feet. So if you think about a story is in a building that's about 10 to 12 feet, where you're looking at a 50-story building, that's the height of it. I mean, when you're standing on Highway 4 looking up at the vehicles, it's a long ways up. So you need to have towers and facilities to be able to maneuver the vehicle, be able to work on it, and then get it ready, test it out, and ready to fly. And we're going to talk a little bit too about we are expanding our village and our other capabilities out there, because if you have over 2,100 people there every day, just SpaceXers alone, and then on top of that, all of the contractors that are working in the pad, at Starbase, village, at the production area, you can imagine we have over 3,000 people that are there every day working there at the end of Highway 4. Next slide. I appreciated the mentions of all the investment that SpaceX has done. I mean, this has obviously been a major investment for the company. You know, we've been putting in billions into this area to get the facilities ready to be able to do that. It's not easy building at the end of Highway 4, and we've been building our star factories, our utility structures, all of our support buildings for all the moves and everything else, plus homes, amenities, and other things that we need to be able to support the families that are staying close to the production areas. So when you look at the numbers here, these numbers are growing. We're getting ready to put out our new economic impact report. It'll be coming out over the next few weeks. And when you see these numbers are growing and growing, as really also the communities are gaining the benefit of the missions. You know, it used to be before, you know, obviously when we were doing the Hopper missions, those were interesting, but there's nothing like an orbital flight. And so we've been very happy that people are enjoying these missions and people are coming out to see them. The last mission I was out watching out at South Padre, and it was really great to be there standing with a whole group of people that were cheering for us to be able to get that mission going. Next slide. I will tell you, one of the things that make our folks really happy is helping the communities. And so one of Maricela's many jobs is to go figure out how to engage in the community in a way that helps them, but also lets our people really reach out and have an impact on the community. They do care. And so some of the things that we do are obviously, we went to BARC. We went to the dog shelter and painted buildings and washed dogs, and a few people brought dogs home too. I think it was very smart of the shelter to have us come out, because if there is one thing SpaceXers like, is they like their dogs. But we've also packed lunches at centers. We're a major sponsor of the turtle rescue. One of the favorite things for our folks is to actually go out and be with the volunteers for the turtle rescue mission and rescue. It's a major deal when we actually find turtles and are able to bring them on the hovercraft back over to the rescue facilities. You would have thought that, you know, when we had this cold snap, I can't believe how many people were out there rescuing turtles and then releasing them. But that being able to be part of the community, help the community, is a big deal for the folks, and one of our big draws. So next slide. coffee, and you see like the dog park. We have a dog park for our, to keep the dogs occupied while their folks are at work. Because really this is about us getting the work done. As you can see, there's a ton of work that needs to happen when you're building the rockets. I mean, we start out with rolls of steel on one end of the Star Factory, and it comes out the other end with boosters. And so you saw the big high bays. Those are high bays for us to be able to work on our boosters and our Starship. The other thing, if you notice, the tower is a very different tower than what I grew up with. But it's another innovation to have what we call those chopsticks, to be able to come in, grab the vehicle, be able to move it and use it for stacking. It's another innovation where typically you'd either have to stack in a building and roll out, or do like we do at the Cape, which is you have an erector that actually pushes up. That'd be very, very tough to have that on a large Starship. So it's another innovation where we're trying to get to the place where we're able to have these vehicles come in, be able to stack them, test them, and then be able to launch, because it's that launch cadence that's really going to allow us to be able to get the amount of materials that you need to be able to do long-term missions in space. So let me talk a little bit about Starbase. Get a little sense of Starbase. And that video, we're actually going to have to do a new video because we don't have those tents anymore. We right now have a huge Star Factory, and you'll see it in that with just Elon a year ago said, you know what, we need to get rid of these tents, and this is now going to be a permanent location for us to be producing and launching vehicles. So we're going to build a Giga Starship factory. And so we are in the process of building a 1 million square foot factory. We're actually if you drove down Highway 4 right now, you'd see we've almost got all the corners pretty finished up. So it's been a huge endeavor for us. We're also bringing in and we've been building a office building so that we can consolidate our folks in the office building. And then we'll probably be in the process of building another high bay. We are building a second pad right now too. So you can imagine that's a lot of building going along with us building homes and everything else. All of this is to get us ready to be able to start meeting the production and launch rate that we need to be able to accomplish our missions. So Starship is the largest, most powerful rocket in history. It's not just a little bit more powerful. Like I said before, it's 2 times as powerful as the Saturn V. 400 feet tall. Actually moving that up, we're actually extending it up with the pad and everything else. It's almost 500 feet. So just standing at the bottom and looking up at it, it's pretty freaking amazing. Designed to be reusable. We talked before about the first stage, and the importance of returning that. We're looking at bringing back and reusing the boosters and the Starships. And so we're still figuring this out. We're a big test, fly, really monitor and learn from each flight. Obviously making sure that each mission is conducted in a way that is safe for the people and the general public that's out there. But it's okay for us to maybe not meet all the mission objectives, because that's the best way for us to learn. And so, as we've been working through this, we've been using first the Hopper missions, the suborbital missions, to be able to learn and then take that learning into our orbital missions. And each of our orbital missions, we've taken a little bit farther based on the learning that we gained from the last mission. And so we call these our orbital test flights. If you notice, they're not just, we haven't jumped into the mission yet, because we're still testing. And we are learning on every flight as we're testing. Continuing to, the first flight we got through the initial booster piece, the second piece, which we added the hot staging capability, which is really a capability that had not been done by any U.S. company before, where you actually start your second stage, the Starship part of the vehicle, before you start the engines on there, before you separate. And so to ensure that you're able to help with the separation of the two vehicles. That all worked on our flight last November. And then the key thing out of this last March was, and I'll be talking about this in a few more missions, is us really getting to those orbital flight test objectives. This is all, people go, why are you doing this? And one of the reasons why we're doing this is because we are aiming towards being able to land and be the lander for a human, for a NASA crew member on the moon. And for us to be able to do that, we have to be able to have multiple missions, tanker missions, where we are being able to conduct and fill a tanker that's in orbit around the Earth, and then fly a Starship up to the tanker, have it be fueled, and then that tanker, that will be the fuel that then will take that Starship and fuel that Starship to be able to get to the moon, be able to rendezvous with a Orion spacecraft, and then be able to then land those crew members on the moon. All this is going to take us a lot of learning for us to be able to get these next steps, but we're continuing to buy down and prove out that capability as we work through our test missions going forward. So it was, what's been a lot of fun for me coming in from NASA is it's the learning in these test flights that's so critical. And what's great about SpaceX is they're able to go say, oh yeah, that was kind of a big blow up. But guess what, we learned all these things here that really is what enables us to make that progress faster. So it's a very different concept. Companies typically view that having something so visible like that is viewed as a failure, but we actually learned a ton from this, and it's what's enabled us to not just be able to fly once every 3 years, 4 years. Like, we've been able to make successive engineering progress by being able to safely, and for us it's not a failure because we learned a bunch, but safely have the vehicle gracefully fail in a way that still keeps people safe, but then we can make sure that we're learning from every vehicle. It's really, really hard to make sure a spacecraft's gonna absolutely work when you're trying to build something that's never been done before, right? And so us being able to learn and then roll that learning back into very quickly is what's really enabled us to kind of push the envelope on a lot of these things very quickly. So let me just run through the last few tests. I already kind of talked about each of these briefly before, but I wanted to give you kind of a context before you saw that video. So we had our first integrated flight test a little over a year ago. It really established that the fact that Starship, that the booster was working, and verified the thrust, and that we were able to show how the engines and the interaction of the engines were working together. We had a second flight test in November. I was lucky enough to be able to be here at the time. All 39, it's amazing. It was an amazing thing for us because the booster actually worked perfectly. And so we were able to launch and separate with the hot staging. We were able to get the Starship vehicle to an altitude. We were able to relight the engines, and then be able to terminate both the Starship and the booster vehicles. That was for us an amazing flight. Just being able to do that first time ever hot staging, all 33 engines worked. The relight of the Starship, all being able to see the systems all working on the major parts of the propulsion of the vehicle was huge for us. The other thing that was a big deal, when when you saw the pad, that pad design is also a very unique pad design. Normally, pads have huge flame trenches in them. And one of the things that Elon had really wanted to prove was to see if we could do a clean pad interface. Well, we ended up finding out on the first mission that didn't work really well. So we had to re-engineer, add a water diverter system, and then that helps protect the concrete surface of the pad. And we ended up finding out that that worked beautifully on the November mission. I was able to go out and walk the pad right after the mission, and it looked beautiful. The reason we want to do that is because it's another place where we don't need to refurbish flame trenches. We don't need to be refurbishing the pad after every launch. It lets us be able to get the next vehicle up and be able to launch it quickly. So it's another place where Elon's really pushing us to be able to get into this flight cadence that we need to be able to do our missions.
This is the company will go roll for Flight 3 of Starship. Invite 2.
Go.
Stage 1.
Go.
Stage 2.
Go.
Flight directors go over push. Vehicles get you memories. Vehicle supersonic. Seat separation.
You could see the red, wherever you're seeing like that red glow around, that's that video footage that I was telling you that was just like amazing to me, because we always, when we had the crew capsules coming in, the part of the mission that always makes my heart stop is there's a blackout period where you don't have comm during that phase, and you lose contact with the crew members. And you always are like holding your breath until you get to the other end. And so to be able to have comm through that period, as we're working reentry, to me, it would mean that maybe I wouldn't have to, I'd always feel like I held my breath for like 3 minutes. So I'm looking forward to the Starship reentries, because when we eventually, a few more years, but eventually we'd be like 5 people after we really gained the reliability data we need to have for the Starships. But it's going to be awesome because we won't have those big blackout periods with the Starlink on. So that was the video of our third integrated test that we had in March. You know, like I already talked about, we were able to add reliability upgrades. We're always learning and updating the vehicles as we're flying. Once again, it's really nice. You can always see when all the engines are working. It's that nice 33 all lit up at the back end, and able to see how things are working. The other nice thing, when you watch a video and you see it taken off the pad, there's always this concentric, when the engines all work together and they're really working efficiently, you can kind of see the flame kind of come together and push up, and that's when you have a really nice integrated propulsion burn. So as an old propulsion engineer, that's always one of my favorite parts of seeing that booster piece. So as you guys are looking at future flight test missions, really appreciate how those engines work together. We made it through boost back. If you notice that you saw a little bit of the video as it was coming in, and we really began to see how we can work the GNC, learning how does the booster operate coming back. So we got some initial data on, and we're rolling in changes to our GNC design for this next mission, see if we can get it a little bit farther. And then first time that we ever started working through the Starship reentry phases. And so, and I've talked about the live video over and over because that's the first time ever. Everybody that saw that today, that's the first time that anybody in the world's been able to see footage like that. So more to come. You know, we're right now, the vehicle's ready. If you go out to the pad now, we've got a Starship and a booster sitting there. We're getting ready to do our integrated wet dress. We call it our wet dress, to make sure that we can flow all propellant, everything. You know, you want to make sure you've got all the kinks out. We've tested both of these sections already, but now we're going to do an integrated test, and we'll be looking at doing that in the next week. You know, these are test flights, but it has been so much fun to me, like we talked about at the beginning, for me to be able to experience with the team all their dedication, hard work, as we continue to learn and take each and be able to build out each of the phases that we need to be able to conduct our long-term lunar, and really Elon's whole vision of making us an interplanetary species and being able to eventually go to Mars. So one day, I'm not sure when, I was doing a speech and they were like, tell me when we're gonna go to Mars. And it's like, we got a lot of learning to do before we go to Mars. But I do know that one day, out of the Rio Grande Valley, there will be a Starship going to Mars. Thank you. We got some questions, but I'm not sure who's going to. We'll have to see if, or I could take questions from the audience. However, go ahead.
What do y'all have set up for lightning protection, because that is so high?
Yeah, we do. We have towers, but we also have our on-site, we have 2 on-site meteorologists too. But you always have to have lightning towers, to be able to do that. So we do watch the weather. we have folks that are always constantly watching the weather. Because not only that, but if you know, we're by a big body of water. We've got pads, we've got outside areas, we've got the hangars. We're always moving people around. So it's also just from an overall safety perspective that we have a bunch of tall structures on a very, very flat area, and so we got actually all of our buildings.
Are you guys planning on buying any more beach in Boca Chica?
We are pretty much limited by the beach area. I mean, because of the Texas Parks area that's there, there are small areas, but they're not really great to be building on. One of the great things, if you look at all the big major ranges that are out there, they are in the middle of wildlife regions, because guess what, if you didn't have a wildlife region, you probably wouldn't have a bunch of open land. So it is definitely there's only a limited amount of commercial land that's there. But it is nice to be in the wildlife reserve, because it would not be good for us if people were building, complexes around there. So, first, commercial spaceport. So one of the challenges we have, typically spaceports are federally mandated, and so we have to obviously be working with the federal government, state, Cameron County, for us to be able to, as a commercial orbital spaceport, figure out how do you coexist with all the other activities that need to happen and keep people safe. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about Booster 11 testing just recently and the other starships that you have in mind? It seems like Starship 30 and 31 are being tested at the same time, prepping for the next flight, and when the next flight will be.
Yeah, so the vehicles are out. The vehicles that we're going to be flying for our next mission are out on the pad, getting ready, waiting for our wet dress. We were testing our next round of vehicles, next round of Starships, and we had a test anomaly that we're assessing right now and understanding what does that mean. We're kind of holding off on our wet dress, because one of the things you do, we're always working on vehicles, but when there's a problem on a vehicle that's in the flow, you want to make sure that you can separate the cause of that problem from your flight vehicle. And so what the teams are doing right now is really going and saying, is it the same design exactly? Is there some other reason for us to have separation, to make sure that we're not going into a flight test with there being an issue. I think right now they're working through that, and we'll probably have the vehicle cleared. We're still working on licensing with the FAA. They're going through a few last minute kind of crossing their T's, dotting their I's. We're hoping to have the license by the end of May, early June timeframe, and we're going to be ready. like always, we're going to have the vehicle stacked, and the first day we get that license, we're going to fly.
On one of your last slides, you talked about the noise damping. And
Yeah.
I have a friend that lives close to the pad, and they said that they didn't notice the rocket had even launched. Is that because of that?
Well,
Is it a different?
We are managing things, but I also think like wind direction makes a big difference. I noticed, Marisol and I kind of monitor like the interaction, and one of the things we're really working on is how do we make sure that the area that maybe isn't used to orbital launches understands kind of what's a feasible environment and what's not a feasible environment. With rockets launching and going up, you get the loud, it's noise, but it's a vibration of the air kind of moving out. It's not in the ground. So one of the things we have to educate people on is this is not going to hurt your foundation. It's not going to hurt, it's not we're not doing something in the ground, which is kind of would be permeating. It's actually moving, through the air, and you're getting vibrations through the air. What does impact it a lot, and we do a lot of monitoring. In fact, we have monitoring on the old lighthouse, we have monitoring in South Padre, we have monitoring all around, because per our FAA licensing, we have to show that we're able to keep within our licensing requirements for our impacts. And so far, everything is within those limits. In fact, we've probably been a little bit conservative in certain areas, which makes sense, because when you haven't flown, you add more margin to your calculations. But wind direction changes a lot. I lived in Florida outside Kennedy Space Center, and some launches you wouldn't even know they went up, and some launches, depending on the wind direction, the difference in wind direction between the second launch where we heard a lot of people from Brownsville were like, man, that was loud, and then the third launch, everybody's like, that wasn't very loud, you know, so, I think wind direction does help, but we also have to stay within limits on wind direction. Like, there's all these conditions that we work with the FAA on that drive us, like our launch conditions that we have to stay within.
Being one of the most innovative companies in our region and offering the most exciting opportunities here for our community and students, do you foresee a time when tours for the public may be available again, or perhaps the visitor center?
Yes. So I think, you know, right now, like I talked about, we've just got a ton of construction going on. I mean, we're struggling with how do we have walk paths for our employees? Like, we have all these, like, we're always having to rework our walk paths. So right now, we've kind of held off on doing tours just because I'm every day working to keep people safe on site, and just with all the construction going on, just don't want a bunch of people that don't have to be exposed to that on site. But one of our licensing requirements is actually to give tours to students in educational areas and be able to have people benefit from STEM interaction. So we are, when we get the 1 million square foot factory down, when we're don't have cement trucks going down Highway 4 and working to it, when we get the road a little bit better, I mean, we're working very hard with TechStop, because I don't know if you guys have been on Highway 4, but I'm pretty horrified sometimes that we've got people, all these employees, our children in their school buses going down that road. So when we get those conditions better, then absolutely we're going to be working towards that. I do think we're going to have another educational day in October, and we're hoping that things will be a little bit less crazy then, and looking forward to having a large group of children out again. We did just sponsor in April supported the big beach cleanup, which is also kind of fun, and we always have a free lunch that everybody can go get up by the restaurant and kind of enjoy the area for that too. So we're trying to figure out other ways to get it done without, but yet not adding to any additional exposure for people.
Is there like a timeline for the Star Factory? Is it 2025, 2026?
It's always, we gotta go faster. So no, I think we're shooting for a Star Factory. We're in the last phase right now for it to be done by the end of the year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Brownsville seems to be the tip of the spear for developmental launches, and even Elon was quoted last month saying something like that, plus 2 towers in Florida for the operational side. The last thing that you said here, where we fly to Mars from here, is encouraging. Do you see that happening, or will we be always the testing facility, or we need to talk to Florida and then they punch the ticket along?
Well, we need 2 launch areas to be able to meet our manifest, for us to be able to do that. So just a single landing requires 15 tanker launches. Okay, so and they need to be done within a certain period of time. And so one of the reasons why this is going to be our workforce area, but we will also need the Florida phase 2 to be able to do the number and the sequencing of the missions. But if you're really colonizing Mars, you need a crap load of missions to be able to do that. And so I actually feel like we're trying to figure out how to do the mix, but we really want to keep this ability to be able to make changes and test and be able to roll those changes into a vehicle and have that be out of our Starbase facility. With crewed launches, you may not be able to have all of the changes, and the structure may be a little bit, but for some of our tanker missions and everything else, we really want to be gaining that efficiency, right? And so we're still working through this, but I think what's really cool is that we know Starbase is going to be the home of Starship. Yeah, and then go to, sorry.
Okay, so I have a two-part question. What are some of the challenges or attractions facing the facility and employees when it comes over to the housing and quality of life projects that may attract current future employees to the area, and how that may or may not affect the operations?
Well, I think one of the big challenges, and I talked to you already, is just getting the infrastructure. If you realize all the infrastructure that's needed, just getting down Highway 4, right? I mean, there's really understanding, when you think about the number of new companies that the port has coming into it at Brownsville, and then the fact that we have, you know, over 3,000 people coming down Highway 4, and you look at the infrastructure that's there, there's a very critical need for just being able to look at how flow and how just basic supplies are flowing through that east side of Brownsville there, and with supplies also coming in from the port. So, you know, it's tough to be able to sit down and say, how do you plan for a major economic growth area on this east side of town that really hasn't seen that? But it's, right now it's a critical phase for us, especially as we're also gearing up for the port to be gaining a lot of that Houston port traffic too. And obviously we're working, we SpaceX are working with Next Decade, the port, and other people on like what are the infrastructure projects that we need investment from the state and federal level to be able to support in that area, but also getting everybody else to be thinking about even a small thing like timing of the lights. I know the city of Brownsville has been working how to time the lights to be able to handle traffic flow. There's also just a basic issue of how do we get people to invest in hotels, restaurants, infrastructure on that east side of town too, to be able to, and that we have to continue to work with them, with local providers on, is there a business case for that on that side? But if you look at just the amount, like this is what we lose in people driving through Brownsville, most of the hotels are off 69, being able to come down and be able to have access to Starbase. You know, we're always like, how do you get people on site even quicker? And that's also another area, like how do we be able to create infrastructure there that can support the business community that's now growing on that side of town.
So a lot of individuals that are here are business owners themselves. How can they learn about potential opportunities that might exist with SpaceX?
So I think the big thing is to, obviously Maricel is here because as there's questions or things that you have, please reach out to her. We're looking at different kinds of open houses that may be helpful for different suppliers. You know, she works with our Nicholas Ramirez, who is our local supply folks. We're always looking for new contractors, new capabilities that may be there to be able to bid on different projects that we have. But also let us know too how we can be helping out. One of the things that Maricel and I have been working on is how to get people out into the community. I appreciated when the mayor was talking about how many of our folks live here. One of the reasons I'm here is because we have a large population of folks that are living in this area. And so one of the big goals that we've been having is how do we get people that are newly here out in the community at different restaurants, at different activities, at different local family community areas to be able to get them familiar too with the attractions and activities that are out here. So if you've got things that you think would be a cool, you know, activity for us to do, we've done taco tours, wine tours, beer tours. We got an alpaca ranch event coming up. Obviously, the Gladys Porter Zoo is like an annual family event for us. We've, you know, rented out the Schlitterlawn Water Park after it's closed. I mean, so we do want to figure out ways to be able to get our folks also invested in the community, because once they start putting their roots down, then that's how we keep our best talent here.
have any plans to put in a tunnel, a bridge, a ferry system, or anything to connect Boca Chica back to like 100?
We have looked at ways, I mean, right now what we've invested in is a hovercraft system that takes our employees back and forth. But that is when we looked at the cost of it, it's a huge infrastructure cost. It's probably, over 150, close to $200 million. So we haven't invested in that yet. I mean, right now, like I said, we've been investing in getting the factory going, getting the additional pad built, which is also, all of those are huge investments for us. And then working on how do we start building up and partnering with the state and federal levels on these infrastructure pieces that we need to be able to have in place for us to be able to conduct business long-term at the end of Highway 4. I can tell I'm getting the hook here. Thanks again for having me. I really, really appreciate your time, and thank you again for the warm welcome.
Before you step down, I'd like to invite our mayor as well as the EDC board president, Javier Del Guillon, to join me up on the stage. We've got a small token of appreciation to Kathy to present to her on behalf of the EDC as well as the city of Arlington. Little bird told us that she was very fond of chocolates, so we made sure to have a basket for her with some Arlington sweets.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, let's get back there so I can get email. Okay. Okay.
Let's get you ready.
Are your eyes blinking?
Ladies and gentlemen, that was an incredible presentation and a glimpse of what's coming down the pipeline with SpaceX. And so we are certainly very excited and proud to have them here in our community. Before we adjourn, I certainly want to thank TSTC for helping us host this event here in the community. And I certainly want to thank my staff, including Marianne, Brandy, Tanya, Jane, and Beverly for helping us organize this event, as well as Maria Escobar with UTRGV that offices with us. Kathy, I know you have a very busy schedule, and I know that you have to rush out, but before you do, I'd like to ask the members of the City Commission who are here, as well as the EDC board, to come forward for a quick photo before Kathy has to leave. And so with that, we are adjourned, and thank you very much for joining us this morning.